Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll go ahead and get started soon. We'll give everyone a few minutes to trickle in, and then we'll go ahead and kick off the conversation. But thank you for joining us today. Alrighty, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining our webinar today. Today, we'll be discussing career planning in a virtual world. I know many of you are still working from home or you're currently in transition, so we are here to hopefully offer some great advice that you can use as you continue to grow professionally, and given the pandemic, that you can take advantage still of your network, of all these opportunities that are still out there. So thank you so much for joining. My name is Stephanie Jacobo. I am the Partnership Engagement Manager at ASE. I have the pleasure of working with a lot of different companies that are always looking for talent and reaching out to us to make sure that we're connecting them with our membership. So really happy to have all of you here and seeing that you're still involved and interested. And this webinar was organized in collaboration with our Young Professionals Network. Our Young Professional, HYPB, our Hispanic Young Professional Board. So they kind of took lead on this and organizing this with our partners at Fannie Mae. So just to give you a few updates on what is going on with ASE, for those of you that are not familiar with the organization, we are a national nonprofit organization. We've been established since 1982. We're headquartered in Chicago, but we do a lot of work nationally. We have some of our main markets include Texas, New York, Miami, California. So happy to have some of you. I know many of you are from outside of Chicago, so welcome. Just to give you a few information about the mission of ASE. So ASE is really focused around building that pipeline of Latino talent. So we have a lot of programming that we offer from high school all the way to executive level, making sure that we're providing our membership with insight, access, and support to continue furthering their careers. And we do that around engagement, recruitment, and professional development. So one of the main things that we are focusing on right now is our National Leadership Summit, which will be our 38th annual conference. This year is a little bit different. We're completely virtual, which is really exciting and interesting. It allows us to engage a lot more people across the nation. So I hope that you all can take some time out of your busy schedules and join us during the National Leadership Summit. So the dates for the National Leadership Summit are August 26th through the 28th. We have essentially different tracks during each day. On the first day, we'll be discussing ERG involvement, talking about best practices. On the second day, we'll be discussing community involvement and how we can all continue to give back to our communities. and making sure that we're being mentors as we grow in our careers. And then last but not least, the last day will be around leadership development. So we will have different sessions talking about unleashing your executive presence for those of you that are ready for that next step in your careers. But we'll also have a virtual career fair. And this will be taking place on August 28th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. You can register for free. The rest of the conference does have a price, but this specific portion of the event is free. We have over 40 partners that are confirmed that will be recruiting during this event. So definitely something worth taking advantage of. You'll have an opportunity to talk to recruiters one-on-one from different companies, which is really exciting. And they will have access to your resume. You can chat with them, but also a video. So during this webinar, we hope to give you some advice on how to do so effectively and make sure that you have a presence during your virtual conversations and that people remember you and hopefully follow up with you and connect you with different opportunities. To stay engaged and learn more about other opportunities at ASSET, you can follow us on LinkedIn. We're always on a weekly basis. We're updating everything that we're doing. We have different webinars. We have different programs, development programs, and so on throughout the year. So these are some of the platforms that you can follow us to stay connected. Just a friendly reminder that we will be having a few raffles and really fun ways for free opportunities to join our National Leadership Summit. So stay engaged, especially on Instagram and Facebook for those opportunities. Hopefully you can receive a free ticket to attend our full conference. So stay connected. And then last but not least, I want to welcome you all for the purpose of this specific webinar. I do ask that you mute yourselves throughout the course of the webinar. I want to encourage you all to stay really active on the chat box and definitely to ask a lot of questions to make sure that you're leveraging this opportunity to have these speakers and their knowledge and that you can ask them a lot of questions. But now, I would like to pass it on to my colleague, Nancy Cambron. We are, like I mentioned, where she has led kind of like the organization of this webinar along with our Hispanic Young Professional Board and have been working in collaboration with Fannie Mae, who really wanted to make sure that to deliver and share some of this content for you. So thank you all for joining again. And Nancy, thank you for leading and being part of the board.
Thank you, Stephanie. So hello, everyone. Welcome to ASSET's Career Planning in a Virtual World. As Stephanie mentioned, my name is Nancy Cameron Perez. I am the Assistant Director of Admissions for the Evening and Weekend MBA program at Kellogg School of Management. My focus area right now includes leading the strategy for diversity and inclusion recruitment in the admissions office for the Working Professionals program. I do have a background in diversity and inclusion initiatives, employee recruitment and retention, and HR management. And as Stephanie mentioned, I also serve as one of the co-chairs for the professional development area of ASSET's Young Professionals Board. So if you're looking to get involved in our ASSET Young Professionals Board, definitely reach back out to me. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about ways to do that. And so jumping into the webinar, during this webinar, you're going to hear from the Asset Alliance for Career Enhancements Young Professional Board, myself, and Fannie Mae on effective virtual practices that will enhance your potential of getting hired amidst the pandemic. So while we understand that finding a job and staying on your career track right now looks different than it did even 6 months ago, we will share tips and tricks on how to improve your candidacy and enhance your virtual presence. So joining us today is Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae is a Fortune 50 company that helps make the 30-year fixed rate mortgage and affordable rental housing possible for millions of Americans. They partner with lenders to create housing opportunities for families across the country. 1 in 3 homes and 1 in 5 multifamily mortgage loans in the United States are financed by Fannie Mae, and their mission has been and continues to be to drive positive changes in housing finance and to make the home buying process easier while reducing costs and risks. And with that, I will turn it over to our panelists of the day, Kelly Bradshaw and Suzanne Ling, to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about what led them to their current role. So Kelly, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Thanks so much, Nancy. Good afternoon, everyone. As Nancy mentioned, my name is Kelly, and my current role with Fannie Mae is I am a diversity and recruiting programs manager. What that means today for Fannie Mae is I am very busy, but I, but that is, I think, everybody in the diversity inclusion space. But I oversee, I always like to say I have two parts of my role. So one is I oversee our recruiting programs that are for non-matriculating. So for example, we have a rotation program, as well as, if any of you are familiar with Year Up, that is one of our partners where I run the internship program through Year Up. And then I also oversee our diversity and inclusion strategy for the organization, specifically related to talent acquisition. So what are the partnerships and what are things that we can, what are tools and resources we can put in our recruiters' hands, as well as our hiring managers, to really help them think about talent in a diverse and every which way you can think about diversity, equality, and inclusion when they're considering hiring for their teams. Nancy, a little bit about what led me to Fannie Mae. So I have been with Fannie Mae almost a year and a half. Fun fact, Suzanne and I started a week apart. So sorry if I'm taking some of your thunder, Susie, but we started, so we've been on a similar journey together, but prior to that, I spent 11 and a half years with CEB, which is now Gartner. And I led, I always like to talk about, I led a variety of recruiting teams. The only one I did not go near was IT, and that was on purpose. No offense to anyone in the technology space. And then also part of my role as being a leader on that team, I had the opportunity to help build out our diversity and inclusion recruitment strategy and work with a variety of ERGs with our employee resource groups within CEB, which I do, again, of course, within Fannie Mae as well. What led me to Fannie Mae was their mission. So Nancy just talked a little bit about it, and the way that they think about diversity and inclusion. You could feel, like when I got in the interview process, we're going to talk more about that, you could just feel the inclusive culture, and that D&I was really important to the organization. And then being an individual stepping into that, you want to be in a place where you're going to have folks that will rally behind you. And I felt that through my entire interview process, and continue to feel a year and a half later.
Thank you, Kelly.
Great. Well, and as Kelly mentioned, we have been at Fannie Mae for almost about the same amount of time. I currently am a director as part of our recruiting leadership team. I oversee our executive recruiting function, as well as recruiting for our enterprise functions. So the way to think about that is all of your finance, risk management, marketing, audit, compliance, et cetera, roles, as well as recruiting for our multifamily business. So I love it. To Kelly's point, I also stayed away from tech, although I do love tech, and actually joined Fannie Mae about a year and a half ago from Capital One, where I was part of their tech HR organization, developing some of their people and talent development programs. So started my career on a little bit of the flip side of recruiting, so in-house at an executive search firm, mostly focused on nonprofit and higher ed executive recruitment, as well as work in the tech and media space. So did that for about 12 years before heading to Capital One 8 years ago. And it's been a wild ride ever since. But I think part of what drew me to Fannie Mae, in addition to the mission that Kelly spoke about, was the people. Because of the unique role Fannie Mae plays at kind of, the very core, underpinning of the mortgage industry, the people that are there are incredibly impressive and incredibly critical to making sure that the industry thrives. There are a lot of banks that most homeowners and those who are looking to own a home in the future deal with on a day-by-day basis. But the amount of scope and impact of what Fannie Mae does is pretty incredible and pretty breathtaking. And so the opportunity to go to a place that has that kind of impact and then work with these great minds who are all part of making that hum and sync was what really attracted me.
Thank you, Kelly and Suzanne, for those wonderful introductions. So we already have tons of questions coming in, so that's really great. I would love to kick us off just by starting, even before hitting that apply button. Are there any tips that you would love to share with the folks attending today in terms of how to prepare for the job search process? I know when I'm speaking to my applicants, I always tell them, get engaged with us from an early start. Talk to some of our admissions officers, and then really start to think about what are your goals when you're looking to apply. And so I would love to hear what you share with candidates when they're starting their job search process, especially right now that everything has gone virtually.
Yeah, and I would say it's probably even in my mind goes a step back from there. Looking for a job is a lot like what we do as recruiters. So it's thinking about what is the target list of companies that hold either the attributes around how they function, how they operate, the types of roles they have, the credibility they have in a specific industry or market, the values that they have, and start to put those pieces together. Because I think too often somebody says, well, I'm an accountant and I've worked in banking, so I'm going to just go look at all the other banks that are out there and figure out if there's a job. So oftentimes we forget that the core skills that we have are transferable across multiple types of industries, and you don't have to pinpoint one in particular, but it really does help to start to put down on paper, not just what's the job, but start from the bigger lens of what's the company. So I usually tell people to start there and then start doing your 6 degrees of separation game. Go on to LinkedIn, go into your Facebook feeds, go into your Twitter feeds, find out who people are that that work at those companies. Start to reach out and do your virtual networking in the same way that you would in the pre-pandemic world. Set up your virtual coffee with somebody, pick their brain about what types of skills that company looks for, how much hiring they're doing. I think one of the hardest things to really understand right now is what companies are still hiring, and are they hiring in your particular field? There are a lot of unique websites that have kind of popped up, and I do have to look because there is one that is a resume database that is kind of a unique one that's popped up just during the pandemic for people to kind of quickly get their resume into somewhere from a layoffs perspective. There is also a website called layoffs.fyi, which is a great way to track what companies have been laying off, so you can steer clear of, okay, well, I'm seeing them lay off a bunch of people in this area, but I don't see anything here. So you can do the gut check of where they're still hiring. So I think it's starting to both understand like who is really out there still looking, and then marrying that with who is in your network that can get you behind the job application process. So you're not one of 300, you're a direct, feed or referral into whoever the recruiter is working on that role, or whoever the hiring manager is working on that role. And sometimes it's about creating those relationships from scratch as part of the process. So you may not know somebody at that company today. Figure out how to find a friend that knows someone, or figure out how to reach out to somebody through your network and say, hey, I would love for you to be a potential mentor. Would you be willing to spend 15 minutes with me on the phone just to help me during my job search?
Thank you, Suzanne. Kelly, anything you might want to share?
No, I think, I mean, just the one thing I saw somebody did to me the other day, and just to use a recent example, is they specifically did that on LinkedIn. They saw that I was
Mhm.
connected to we were connected, we had a mutual connection. And when they sent me the LinkedIn email, they referenced that, said, you and I are both connected to so and so. I'm interested, I'm starting a job search and I wanted to pick your brain a little bit. So people are doing it. So I couldn't underscore enough what Suzanne just said about that. And I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to reach back out to her. And, and even if you don't have a connection, like, as Suzanne said, like recruiters, we're always reaching out to people kind of cold.
Mhm.
So don't be afraid to reach out to someone cold, that if you see you went to the same university, or you both belong to the same professional organization, there might be some other link that you could find. So like this wonderful organization, like you might be able to, you can network through ASA as well. So
That's a really good point. I actually received an email a couple days ago, and it was somebody who wasn't necessarily looking for a job right now, but possibly would be interested in doing what I'm doing in the future. And they said, "Oh, you seem involved in a couple of different things that I would love to learn more about. Do you mind if we just speak for 15 minutes next week?" And now this is a name that pops up in my head. So if ever there are certain things that come up, then I know this is a person I can reference to if an opportunity opens up. So we do have a question that came in about prepping for the job interview. So once they've hit apply, their resume was submitted, it now moved on to the interview phase. So what is the best way that somebody should prepare right now for a virtual interview?
yeah, I mean, I'd start off by saying it's not all that different than if you were walking into a building. But there obviously are some nuances that we need to work through. One is obviously we're using technology, and for
Mhm.
those of us who are doing things, I mean, whether you're helping with homeschooling or just trying to connect with family or working, like there is always a technology error or like something. So, the saying is like kind of have the meeting before the meeting. So test all the links. Make sure your Wi-Fi, or just make sure you have everything ready to go on the technology end. Like, do you have enough bandwidth for video? So whatever you can do, dress for the interview. So
Mhm.
I know a lot of, you see the different memes out there, jokes. I know many of us don't get dressed every day the same as we may have when we were walking to the office.
Mhm.
But still, that when you're using video, and I would always encourage you to try to use video, um, but dress for the job, dress professional attire, even if you have shorts on the bottom, but just make sure that wherever you're going to be seen, that you have the professional attire. Limit your distractions. Again, we've all, I don't, again, in my time that we've been at home, and I think I don't have a tally, but I think we're over, we're close to 150 days since we stepped out of our building.
Mhm.
There's children, there's dogs, there's lawnmowers, there's something in the background of at least one call a day for me. So that may happen to you, and don't be afraid to put it out there. I mean, you need to limit your distractions, but I also, let the person know that, hey, listen, my family knows, or my dog knows I'm in an interview. We had a conversation about it, but if the mailman comes, the dog may start barking, or you might hear. So be put it out there, because that individual is likely working at home too, and they might have something where somebody started
Mhm.
doing road construction right before they were giving a presentation. So keep yourself in mind that, like, we all have things, but do whatever you can to lock yourself in a space that you don't have distractions. um, and when you think about the body language on, while you're not shaking someone's hand, use everything the same. Use your eye contact. Don't, even if
Mhm.
you're referencing your notes, like try to find a way to get everything in front of you so you're not looking up, down, around. That will become very distracting to the interviewer, and they'll wonder, what is that individual doing? What are they looking at? What's distracting them? So again, that comes back to the limit distractions, but really think about, how are you going to project? And then I think that's my final tip is make sure you do project.
Mhm.
I feel like we've been in enough of a video world using FaceTime, Google Hangouts, that while we haven't used it for a professional as much, we've used it. So make sure you are using that eye contact and speak up so that it's very crystal clear for that individual to hear your answer.
I would also add, definitely stage your area. I think just make sure nothing in the background could possibly be distracting. I
Or
think
use a
also,
background even, Nancy. I
yes,
mean, you know, like there's so many,
it's true.
you know, if you need to put, I think I've been on several calls with people who've had like the beach behind, you know, like something else. So if you don't have, you know, I remember we actually did quite a bit of virtual interviews for our campus process at CEB. And it was always kind of fun because we were interviewing university students, and you just never know. And like one guy actually like took a curtain, I looked like a curtain, it was purple, and he had put it behind him, but like you could see how he had like tacked it up. And so I was like, I really appreciated the creativity. I mean, this was several years ago before, you know, like Zoom and everyone had all these backgrounds, but I appreciate the creativity, but it was like, it was just kind of funny because I could see how he put it up. So, you know, yes, I think that's a great tip, Nancy. Whatever you can do to limit the distractions of your background as well.
We actually had construction not too long ago, and so obviously the background looked really different. I went on an apartment staging website and picked a picture off that, and I'm like, this works for now, and so something very easily that folks can do. We just got another question that came in, and this is from Linda. So thank you, Linda, for joining us today. She's a graduate student in public health and will be graduating in December. She's been actively applying for positions, and she noticed that she strays away from positions that list skill sets that she might not quite excel yet. But do you have any, but does have some familiarity with? What are tips that you may have for students who are applying for their first full-time position? And what are things that they can say in the interview process if they may not have as many years of work experience as other folks who have more experience with interviewing?
Yeah, that's a great one. And I I think it's interesting because most roles that are suited for talent coming out of you know, higher ed or undergraduate, I think our best, you know, the hiring managers more often than not are interviewing for a set of behaviors and competencies more so than they are a set of tried and true skills. And I think that's really important to remember, because I think it's easy for us to say, oh, I don't, you know, I haven't led a project from here to there in a corporate environment, or I haven't, you know, launched a new product over here, or whatever that milestone may be. But we sometimes discount how many different kind of experiences we get while we are actually in school that mimic some of the most common behavioral competencies we see. So I mean, gosh, almost every time we write a job description, it's, you know, I want, you know, ability to deal with ambiguity. I need communication skills. I need problem solving. I need influencing. You know, I need teamwork and collaboration. And gosh, most students that I've met have had to be on that team project at some point in time, or maybe they've been a part of a student campus organization, or they've had to work during their time in school. All of those are really ripe to bring experiences forward. And so I do think, and it's part of kind of how you would prep for interviews. It bleeds a little into the prepping for interviews piece, but you know, it's thinking about, okay, if I had to go back and look at my career and say, okay, when did I play a leadership role in a team environment? That doesn't have to be in a corporate team. That can be, you know, when you had that, you know, that marketing project you had to deliver, and how did you step up, and how did you show initiative, and what piece did you own, and how did you make sure that what you were delivering was a truly credible project, and how did you support other members of the team? Those are the pieces and parts they're looking for. So I wouldn't, you know, other than if it is a skill that is a technical skill around a specific software like an Excel or a Tableau or programming and coding languages, those are harder to say, well, you expect me to do it in the job, but I haven't totally done it yet. You know, those are things you probably have to own up front, and then decide how kind of tech savvy you feel, or how what your learning curve typically is on pieces like that. But I'd say any of the other skills or requirements for a lot of those jobs are probably things you can package real life experiences from other other parts of your life, and apply to those same interview questions.
And then I would say on the other end, what are tips that you would share for somebody who, let's say, was let go, recently laid off? Like, what are ways that they can explain that situation during an interview, given that right now we are seeing several companies on both end either do a bunch of hiring or also doing a bunch of layoffs right now? So what are ways that our candidates can explain that in an interview?
Yeah, I can start definitely, Suzanne, add
Yeah.
in. I mean, it's going to be a little bit of, I don't want to say the norm, but there are a lot of people that are going to be in that situation, unfortunately, in these times. So it's practicing what are you going to explain? Like, you know, I was let go and here's what the company did. So don't shy away from it, because like one thing as a, you know, a recruiter who for so many years, like whenever somebody had a gap on their resume, it could be for a whole host of reasons. And I always ask them about it to see how well they had thought through addressing it. Not that that was like the end all be all, but it's like, have they thought through how you're going to talk about it? Because if they thought they could go through the interview and not address it. So I said, just go at it head on. It, you know, my company, given COVID, you know, and there's going to be a lot of people's talk track. So just have a talk track though. And, you know, I was and if there's something, you know, that tangential to it, like, you know, I was the last one in the door. I had only been there 4 months, and they decided like anybody with under, like, if there's something else to it, you know, add that in. So go at it head on.
Yeah, that's the you hit the nail on the head there, Kelly, with that last part. I think context can become really important. It was COVID and they downsized the entire marketing department to be 2 people. You know, I think it's also important to represent what your trajectory was prior to that, to the extent you have it. So I had prior performance reviews that were, you know, I was meeting objectives the last 2 performance cycles. This was part of COVID. These were the other people that were involved in a layoff at that time, or this was the state of the company's earnings or profit or, you know, fundraising at that point in time. I think those couple of pieces combined, somebody's going to go, okay, great, and go straight forward into the, now let me, you know, let me qualify and vet you for the role that you're interviewing for. It won't even be a blip.
So I think you both definitely talked a lot about this, but I completely agree. I think for us, it's definitely hearing more about what are you doing now about it? How are you bouncing back? And so I've heard folks say, because of the layoff, I'm now learning a new skill, I'm taking a class, I'm using this time proactively to really prepare for the future position, just as you mentioned, Kelly, when we were prepping for this webinar. So definitely, like they said, take the question head on and really talk about, well, what did you do while you were in the position in the meantime, and where are you at now? We have another question that came in, and it does relate a little bit to some of the items that we said earlier in the webinar in terms of how to prep for it. But let's say that I have an internet failure during my interview. How should I proceed, and what are the best way to bounce back in after my internet has completely failed?
Be prepared for it. So I think, you know, everybody, again, we're all in this. So I would say to each one of you, if you're going into an interview, you know, before you even get started, say, you know, I'm planning on having good internet, but just in case either one of us gets disconnected, how can we quickly reconnect? So is it you exchange cell phones? So agree on it up front before you even jump in. So if it does happen, because, you know, nothing is going to be more frustrating to either one of you if you then lose 10 minutes of the interview time trying to get back online and then fumbling for your recruiters. And so if you set that up front, then, you know, if something happens, you can just with, you know, your cell phone's going to ring and the 2 of you won't be able to see each other, but you can just keep talking.
Any tips, Suzanne?
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I couldn't agree more. I think I think the biggest frustration point of any is the loss of time in interviews. And frankly, once you've laid eyes on each other, you know, the rapport building can easily continue via phone. The more critical part is that you maximize every minute you have to be together and to get your point across and your experience across.
Thank you. So while I am not a parent, this is something that I've seen a lot with my colleagues. But let's say that you're a parent prepping for an interview. How do you navigate both? Obviously, possibly having children in the background and in another room, or now how do you balance that interviewing and life situation now during COVID? Any tips that you both can share would be great.
Yeah, I mean, one that immediately comes to mind, and Kelly, we can kind of bounce back and forth on this a little bit, but I wouldn't be afraid to ask the company to interview it off hours if you need to. We all, especially the younger your children are, the less controllable they are, the louder they are, and you can't do anything about it. And so, but the fortunate part is those people usually, you know, kids at a younger age are usually either having nap times, or maybe they're sleeping in, or they're going to bed early. So within reason, right? But I would say it is an accommodation you should and could ask for, to say, look, while I am home, I want to put my best foot forward. Are you flexible and open to doing something that is between 7 and 8 a.m. or between 6 and 7, when you know maybe a significant other can be there to also help support where maybe they can't during normal business hours. So that would be one thought that comes to mind. Kelly, what else would you throw out there as?
No, I think that's a great one. I mean, bribery is always good as well.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Television.
television. I bet. No, I mean, no. In all seriousness, I mean, you know, I think it's also depending to, I think, to Suzanne's point, like it really does depend on the age of your kids. So I love the idea of thinking of off hours. And then again, like I said earlier on, it's, you know, I have, you know, there might be a little bit of noise in the background. My attention is here, but just in case you hear, like, you know, I am going to have my 2-year-old sitting on the floor playing, but my attention's 100%. So sometimes you have to be authentic to yourself and like, this is who I am right now. But there's many of us who are facing that. So I think it's okay to also state the situation that you are in, but that you are 100% there.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, and to that point, I also think it's a time where you can say, I would love to introduce myself via video, but then I'm going to request that we turn video off because I don't want your attention, even if I am focused, to be distracted by kids running around in the background, where I know I can quickly mute and stay focused, but it may really throw the interviewer off. So don't be afraid to Kelly's point, to be authentic about the situation you're in, but then to make sure that you're setting yourself up for the best possibility of success by asking for some of these other accommodations.
Yeah. One of the pieces of advice that I got early in my career was that as I progressed through my career, my priorities are going to change. And so sometimes my priority might be balance. Sometimes my priority might be the salary. And so I think this is a really great time for you to see how the company also reacts. Like, I would imagine it as a working parent during pandemic, during COVID, you're going to want balance, you're going to want a little bit of flexibility. And so it's a good way to also test the company that you're applying for to see how they do react in terms of providing you that little bit of flexibility.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's a great point, Nancy. Really important one too.
So the next question that came in is about salary requirements. So should salary requirements be adjusted when applying to jobs during this climate?
I wouldn't say salary requirements should be adjusted. I'm trying to think, because, you know, for better or worse, the impacts that we're going to see to compensation in all companies right now, it's probably less to base salary, more to incentive compensation. So people are going to be forfeiting bonuses and equity and other pieces that are kind of the cherry on top at this time. But to the extent a job is there and available, the compensation is there and available to go with that. Another way I might look at that question though is, do I need to adjust my expectations of the level of role that I should be looking at this time? And I would say, you know, employment is a supply and demand market, right? So right now a year ago, we were in a very low supply, very high demand situation. And it was different because it was low supply because unemployment was almost nothing. Everybody was in a job and companies still had tons of growth they were trying to do. We're now in this very high supply of talent, low supply of open jobs. And yeah, when that pendulum shifts, you have to think to yourself, well, maybe now it's not about me getting into my dream job. Maybe now it's about me taking a baby step into the company that I believe is a long-term fit for my career aspirations, and then making sure there is a path there to get to that right level. So it may be, okay, well, I'm a director today and I want to go somewhere and go become a VP. Well, maybe right now the best step for me to take is to move as a director, get into that company that has promise for the future, and not let a point in time where economics are not in my favor be the thing that stops me from continuing to advance, either because the company is going to stretch me or because the role is going to stretch me.
That's great.
I completely agree. So before my assistant director role, I actually took a specialist role in the department because I had the assistant director role in mind, and a couple years later, it came sooner rather than later, which was great, but it's very true. Sometimes you are able to make small steps, even if during the time, the big step that you want might not be there, it could be there in the future. So
yeah, you hear people talk about, I think the only thing I was gonna say is that, Susie's reference is like, think about the career lattice, doesn't mean the ladder needs to go away, but you have the lattice, or some people like to use the jungle gym analogies where you can jump, or the lattice, like you can jump back and forth to things, and it doesn't always need to be going that way, but you can still pick the ladder back up when the time is right.
So during this time right now, as you're going to be seeing multiple resumes coming in, what are some of the best ways or tips that folks can add to their resume that make them stand out to recruiters?
Yeah, so I think one thing, and we talked a little bit about this, is when when you were asking about like the job requirements, like make sure your resume, is tailored to the job you're applying. So that sometimes means that you have multiple versions of your resume, that you dial something up a little bit more for one job and dial it down for another, because you don't want to have a 10-page resume. But I would say that by, really focusing in and looking, going across the job description and making sure that your resume is speaking to that job. And then you'd be able to back it up, but that make sure that you really cater a little bit to that. So that would be one tip. I don't know, Suzanne, if you have others, but that would be one I'd start with.
Yeah, I think two other quick tips I would add. I always tell people to do the best they can to quantify things in their resume. I was the only person responsible for driving XYZ initiative, or I was one of a team of 5 people cherry picked for that special project. Giving context through quantity really helps kind of frame your resume in a different way that can set you apart. I also think, and especially as you're in those earlier stages of your career, I find people kind of predisposed to wanting to inflate as many small parts because they don't have a lot of years of experience to talk about. And so they will go back to the high school job they had and their college job and that, volunteer position. And then all of those things will suddenly be a quarter of a page each. And they can sometimes actually become a distraction because they don't always align to your chosen career path post-college. And so I would remember to think of your resume as a hierarchy. What's the thing that is absolutely most critical that if they do nothing but stare at that thing for 10 seconds, it's the thing they're going to walk away and remember about it. So current job should be the most robust description, and then it should pare back from there so that the thing you did farthest to go, maybe it's still on there because it actually is relevant to your current job, or maybe you start to slough that off as you got farther in your career if you don't feel like it adds something. So just make sure you're always taking that. It doesn't need to be a kitchen sink approach. It needs to be the, what are all the things that function as building blocks towards the role I'm applying for right now.
Would you say that strategy works the same way with somebody who may have more than 15 years of experience?
I would actually. I would, and I actually think it can get harder there because the farther along you go, a little bit to Kelly's point, it can sometimes be a lattice, not a ladder. And so you may have parts of your job that actually were incredibly beneficial in giving you all of these other elements of what this job requires, but they're not, they don't fit like a logical puzzle piece with what they're saying the skills are. It's not in the same functional area. So I think it's, in those cases, it's a matter of keeping it on, but talking about, you know, the behaviors or the competencies or the specific skills that role gave you versus giving a like daily task list of the things that you had responsibility for.
So we have another question that came in is, would it be okay to have a headshot in your resume?
I think so. I mean, headshots are, I will say headshots are controversial these days for a few reasons. In the recruiting world, as part of the diversity and inclusion effort, I think we are actually, there's a greater push to actually wipe all identifiers off of a resume to have all potential bias eliminated. And so there's that element. But there is also LinkedIn. So most recruiters get resumes and they go on LinkedIn and they can see all of those pieces anyway. So I don't think it hurts. I guess I would question more for the sake of what, like, you know, how do you believe it will help you in getting that? And is that actually better real estate that's used to talk about the accomplishments you've had? I don't know, Kelly, do you have another perspective on that?
No, I think the thing that came to my mind right away, Susie, was what you were talking about, that there is this greater, you know, push of wiping information. So I think to your point, Suzanne, is like if it's going to add something based on the career that you're choosing, then absolutely. But if it, you know, I think the real estate is then more selling what you do is used, that it's better used that way.
I completely agree. I think I would also say, I would maybe reframe it a little bit. So just the way that you both are saying, what is it actually adding? Maybe instead of a headshot, folks can add their LinkedIn profile, the link, and it could then prompt the recruiter to go through your LinkedIn page. It does not necessarily have to have a picture, but they'll be able to see more of your experience in that format. And so just, I would, same thing, agree, just rethink about what exactly would adding a headshot do to enhance you as a candidate in your application.
Yeah, and I think while not exactly related, but just one additional thought is, you know, if you don't have a nice picture on LinkedIn, it is nice to have one. So, you know, if you have a headshot that you really like, you know, I think it's nice to personalize your LinkedIn profile. And especially even as we come back to where we started and Suzanne talking about the networking piece, like, you know, if you're reaching out to someone cold and they have this like nice smiling picture of you, or, you know, whatever it might be, like, it's like, oh, you know, like it gives you like a warmth of somebody potentially. And they're like, yeah, that's great. Like, I don't know. I mean, again, everyone has their own unconscious bias on different things, but, you know, I would say that where you should spend your time is, you know, make sure your LinkedIn profile looks nice, because everyone goes there now, and put the headshot there.
So the next questions that are coming in are negotiating ones. And so for folks that are currently working remote, do you think that there are ways that they can still continue to negotiate a remote job placement while they're job searching for a new job, or maybe with an offer that they got? What are ways that they could negotiate this into their final offer?
Oh, I think it comes like we were talking about, like what is the company, the appetite they have for that. And so there might be ways you can start early in the interview process by asking, you know, how do you support remote work? And what are your current policies right now? So to give you an example, like folks, we are saying to folks that, you know, this job is based in Plano. You are not required to be in Plano now, but when we announce to go back to the office, the job is in Plano. So I think, and we're very clear on that. And so it's understanding those expectations early on. And then in terms of negotiating it in, it depends on what they come back with, because then you'll know, like, no, it's not really it's not part of their culture, or it's just not the way. Because some companies, when you think about certain jobs, and we've talked a lot about this with our reentry plan, is some jobs are just better shoulder to shoulder. So for example, we have our capital markets team, which does all of our trading, and they're talking about different things, and it's just one. Or you think about a strategic planning team, those are, you know, so it's also like, what is your job? And is it one that can be done remotely? So there's that piece. So there's a few different factors. So it's like, one, what is the company culture? But I'd actually start, now that I'm saying it, is your job one that really should be side by side? And the company might have a different view than you do, but there are just enough jobs that, like, having that in-person relationship is going to be really important, potentially because of the function.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think it's when you're starting a new job, you need to make sure that you are being set up for success and that you are setting yourself up for success. So if you are taking on a role that, by nature of how it functions, you know, it's just not going to be as successful in a remote environment. I wouldn't put it out there, but in terms of negotiating it, I would absolutely raise it and understand it as early on in the process as possible, because I do think one of the things COVID is forcing is more of a relook at the roles and what is possible, versus companies saying, oh, well, that's normally based here, but because we love you so much, we're suddenly going to let you go and be remote 100%. I don't feel like we're making those kinds of unique decisions right now. Companies are looking at it as a more holistic picture of how they re-engineer the geography of their workforce.
I completely agree. I think, you know, it goes back to that advice that I got early in my career. My priorities are going to change. And so I think if working remotely is a priority for folks right now, then that is something that they should look at in the positions that they're applying to. Because you want to make sure that you're accepting a position that's going to work for you right now, as well as 6 months from now, and then possibly even maybe 9 months from now. And so definitely just think about what your priorities would be at the moment. And so for the next question that came in is, what is the biggest mistake that you often see during virtual interviews?
Gosh.
Or even in the application process right now.
I mean, one of the things in the application process, and this is maybe a consistent thing, but it's probably fed more now because of the limited supply of roles, is people putting in for jobs that they have nowhere near the qualifications to do. I do think we're in a little bit of a crunch place where if you are going to apply for something, you probably need to have at least 60 to 70% of what that job is demanding. It's a hard time to make a pivot in terms of a job search. Not that it couldn't be done, but you know, once upon a time, I fancied myself a marketing person in the future and kept trying to make the leap from recruiting to marketing. And I'll tell you, now would not be the time to do that. So I guess that's one piece. And I think the other one is just some of the, you know, the tips Kelly mentioned before of the you know, nobody's been able to get to a barber shop for a while. Maybe some people are just now starting to get out. We're maybe not looking our, you know, best the way we would if we were out, you know, totally unrestricted. But don't let that stop you from putting on your, like, suiting up, so to speak, for your interviews. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah, I
you.
think it's just like the only thing I was gonna say, it's just I think some people, because they're not, and this goes back to what I said, it's like you treat it like anything else. You're going in to sell yourself, and so take it very seriously. So I think it's people are like, you know, who do dress too casually or whatever it might be, those don't reflect well on you.
And I would say use the benefit, you know, because we are in this virtual space. I mean, you can have a notebook in front of you with multiple examples, your resume in front of you, multiple examples of how you would answer questions about the skills listed in the job description. Like, take advantage of all of those extra pieces and parts too. I think some of the other mistakes are just people not feeling like they have the time, or not being kind of in the having the muscle built of doing a lot of interviewing, and forgetting that there's homework you should do ahead of time.
So for the folks who possibly might be hearing back that they were not selected for the position that they applied for, what are ways that you would tell them to keep being encouraged, or ways that they could bounce back as they're getting ready to apply for the next position?
Yeah, I think when it comes back to any of this, I mean, you know, it depends what role you applied for, but I think it comes back to where Susie was talking about the networking piece. So if you don't get an interview, or after an interview, like, you know, one, try to get as much feedback as you can, but bounce back and say, okay, so that wasn't the job for me, but who can go help me find that job? And so it really, it's continuing to get up every day and move forward. But I do come back to the networking piece, because as Suzanne mentioned, it's the, how do you, like, in a sea of 300, how are you going to stand out? And that's a lot of the times you might be rejected because, you know, as we've talked about in all of this, there's greater supply right now. So setting yourself apart by finding a referral way in, because, you know, just for those of you who know, referrals normally in most organizations do get priority. So they are, some organizations have SLAs, so recruiters need to review them within 5 business days. So those are the ones that get to the top. So that's where that networking piece will help you get your resume to the top of the pile, versus being, you know, potentially a sea of 300. So I know a little repetitive from what we said, but just to reiterate it.
Yeah, and I guess, and I would just add, recruiters can't always give you this level of detail, but don't be afraid to ask, you know, the recruiter as they're closing you out, you know, was there a specific skill I was lacking? Was it was there anything during the interview, like preparation wise? I've seen candidates come through who have railroaded interviews because they wouldn't stop talking, and they didn't get dinged because of their skills. They got dinged because of how they handled themselves in the interview process. And that's going to be something that can torpedo somebody for any role then. And so not every recruiter will give it to you, but it's worth making the ask.
Thank you. So I know we're getting close to time. So would you both be able to share opportunities that may be coming up employment-wise from Fannie Mae with some of our folks that are listening in today?
Sure. I mean, as I recruit, I mentioned in the enterprise function space, I mean, we continue to see a high demand within the risk sector, you know, as well as in the audit space. Any roles that have kind of IT related to those specific areas are big ones. We are still actively building out our marketing and communications teams. We had a few new officers that we hired last year who were building out there. And then I would say in our accounting sector as well. But I'd say our biggest ramp, and of course it's the space Kelly and I were trying to avoid, is actually in our software engineering hiring. We are actually in the process of moving away from using as much outsourced talent as we have before. So there is an incredible recruiting ramp going on in the technology space. So, so definitely worth going to Fannie Mae Careers, searching up different opportunities, you know, and please reach out to Kelly or I if we can help with networking as you find great opportunities on the site.
Okay, everyone, so as we're getting close to the end of our event today, on behalf of the Young Professionals Network and ASA, I would like to thank both Kelly and Suzanne for joining us today. Please connect with us on LinkedIn if you would like to hear more about Fannie Mae's upcoming employment opportunities, as well as visit some of the sites that they currently mentioned. I also invite you to join us for ASA's 38th National Leadership Career Summit. It will be a virtual summit, and ASA will showcase best practices and stories to inspire individuals to become leaders of their own destiny in the workplace, life, and their communities. The summit will be on August 26th through the 28th. And finally, if you're interested in learning more about other open positions or even looking into a new area of employment, I invite you to join us for ASA's virtual career fair on August 28th to connect with companies that are seeking to hire top Latinx talent from the comforts of your home. And that event is 100% free. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today. Huge shout out and thank you to both Kelly and Suzanne. And we look forward to having everyone in our next ASA event. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for having
Nancy.
us.
Thank you.